Hi, I'm Max Guernsey with Protocor. Today I'm going to talk about how to separate business and GUI logic using refactoring. If you look at the screen, you'll see a class that is basically the default class that is given to you when you create a new MAUI application. This class has a mixture of application logic, like running the counter and deciding what string should be displayed, and GUI logic, like assigning that string to the text field of a button or announcing the new text. We want to separate this into two different classes. So because I want to separate this from one class into two classes, I'm going to start by moving the state, which is stored in the UI right now, into its own object. Now I could just go and type it all out and see what happens, but we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it the refactoring way, which is transformative and methodical. I know from experience that it's easiest for me when I take all of the state that I'm going to move and I encapsulate it. So I'm going to start with encapsulate field. It doesn't matter what the name is, so I'll just call it the count. The other thing I know from experience is that there can be friction if I take a state field and move it to another type during the refactor, unless I make that public. It's only temporary, so I'm going to make this a public field. Now it's time to create the new class. To do this, I'm going to extract a superclass. We'll call it counter view model because that is the goal. And we'll make sure that the count variable moves along with it. Now what I need is an instance of counter view model. Now it turns out the main page already is an instance of counter view model, so we'll start there. The first thing I'll do is create a new field called view model of the correct type. Now that doesn't change behavior. Remember, when you're refactoring, everything you do needs to change only design without impacting behavior at all. Adding a new field to a class does not affect behavior. Likewise, initializing a field that nothing uses doesn't affect behavior. So I can initialize view model to anything, therefore I choose to initialize it to this. Now that I've got a field named view model initialized to this, I can use that field anywhere I would use a this reference. So here we have two implicit this references, and these are the only places where we read or write count because we already encapsulated it. So I can just take this value, which is always equal to this, and paste it there. Well, now all of my access to count, to this count field, is by way of whatever the view model object, the view model field that is, points to, which means I no longer need it to be coupled to the same object that is the GUI object. So I'll just create a new one. But now that I've created a new one, there's really no good reason for this main page class to inherit from counter view model anymore. So we'll put it back to being counter page, or content page, my mistake. And we'll let ReSharper fix the XAML for us. Now that I've done that, there's no reason at all why counter view model needs to inherit from content page. That was just a temporary thing to deal with the fact that the state was stored in main page, which needed to be a content page. So I'll delete that. Now I have a completely separate class that stores the state of this counter. And I create an instance of it. In fact, I can even make this read only if I want. I create an instance of it in the constructor. I did all this in a way that I know every single step was completely safe. Okay, so this temporary parameter, this temporary property, I should say, has served its purpose. So I'm going to inline it. So now I've got the state moved off into an object, but my logic is still mixed together here in this onCounterClicked event handler for my GUI class. And it's really mixed together. And I know it doesn't necessarily look that way at first blush, but it's really the case. I mean, we have a implicit this reference here and there and all over the place. So we've got coupling to the GUI object all throughout this method by way of the this parameter, this pointer. And then also, we have this line here, which both does the logic for deciding what the new button text should be, which is decidedly application logic, view model logic, and then also does the assignment. So we're going to need to separate this all out so that we have blocks of the onCounter clicked event handler that are only about GUI, and blocks that are only about the view model, and the only thing that they both touch are local variables in this method. So that's our next step. First thing I'll do is decouple all of these lines from the this pointer by extracting a variable for view model. I don't care what the name is because I'm going to inline it eventually, so I'll just accept whatever it picks. And then also there's this computation. I'll do the same thing here. I will extract a variable, and now what I have is a number of lines that are only about one thing and a number of lines that are only about another. So updating the counter and computing the new text, that is entirely view model logic. That's represented by these two lines. And then line 20 and lines 24 and 26 are entirely about the GUI. And the only thing they share are local variables. This means it's okay for me to extract a method for the view model logic. And that's what I'll do. And this is the onCounter clicked event, so I'll just use that same name. And if you look here, you'll see that the only parameter we needed was of type counterViewModel, which is fortunate because we don't really want this onCounter clicked method to live in the GUI. We want it to live in the counterViewModel. And it's a static method, which means we can make the method non-static, which will move it to the counterViewModel class and turn it into an instance method call instead of a static method call. Now all of these temporary variables can be inlined, and I'm left with two classes that are cleanly either about GUI or about the view model. The only thing really left to do is a little bit of cleanup, like making this count private again, and maybe turning this into a plus equals 1. And that's how you do it. We've safely and transformatively separated the UI logic and the application logic. Once again, I'm Max Guernsey from Protocor. Thank you.